right, thanks for staying with us. As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk a little bit about that state visit by President Samia Suluhu and also the BBI as well. We hadn't managed to finish our first discussion. We were trying to get Nerima Wako on the line, and we do have her now. She's the Executive Director, Siasa Place. Good morning, Nerima, and I can give you a chance now to give your thoughts on that visit by, the two-day state visit by President Samia Suluhu Hassan.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Good to see you, Lydia, Waiga. So for me, it was such a breath of fresh air to be able to see President Suluhu with so much power and so much grace. And I have to agree with what Lydia talked about in terms of even the fact that on media, but even before I get into that, it's just to say, I think that we're turning a new leaf to be able to have engagements and talk about perhaps business opportunities between our two countries. We know that we haven't had the best sort of relationship, and there's an opportunity to be able to mend that. As much as when she arrived into the country, she was wearing her mask throughout, but even though when she entered Tanzania and she was leaving Tanzania, she hadn't worn a mask. It's just to show that she respects, you know, what her country believes, and she also respects what our country believes. And that for me is a power of diplomacy and negotiation. But the media does cover women differently. Unfortunately, a lot of the pieces were either talking about her fashion, they were talking about the number of bodyguards that she had that were women. And perhaps it's fascinating because we haven't seen that before, but we lose sight, we lose focus of the content of what she's bringing, and it's sexist. And another thing that I also recognized was when Angela Merkel was actually retiring, a lot of the conversation was based on her living in the same apartment, her doing her laundry. That was what was trending, not about the policies or the fact that she was able to remain in a very high level seat in a developed country for such a long time. So women are covered differently in the media, and when they are covered, it's on different issues, not the same as men. And that's something that a lot of our generation is fighting to change, and I believe that it's going to be a very great future if we continue in that trajectory.
Let me then ask you this, Nerima. What do you wish should have been sort of the key takeaways of that visit that may have been covered, but not to the kind of extent you'd have wanted to see or hear?
Her expertise, this is something that she's been doing for a long time as the vice president previously. Traveling, international travel, being able to negotiate, her power in diplomacy, just seeing that and what she's bringing to the table, I think is more important rather than what she's wearing or who's surrounding her and how is she different and how is she going to deliver a speech. Of course, she knows how to deliver a speech. She was the vice president, for goodness sake. So these are some of the conversations that we tend to lose focus on, focusing on the content and the role of her office and the things that she's willing to change. We should even talk about how she's going to combat COVID in Tanzania. How is she doing it differently? And what's that going to take? Is it going to be obstacles, changing a narrative? How is she going to do that sensitively and not necessarily negating what her predecessor had done? So those are some of the challenges that I think that she's going to face as the leader of Tanzania, but we are so focused on other things that are non-essential.
Okay, you raise an interesting point which I want to bring Moses Kilonzo in on. Moses, as the chair of the Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern, how do you know what focus do you wish maybe the media or generally society had in terms of persons with disabilities? What do you wish was the narrative that would come out? Nerima says clearly, as a woman, she feels that the discussion around Suluhu could have gone differently. But for you as the chair of persons with disabilities, whenever issues of persons with disabilities come up, what do you wish was focused on more?
First of all, the media has not been keen in reporting matters persons with disabilities. So first, I'd like to see the media highlight the life of a person with disability, because if everyone knows, for instance, that this is the life of a person with disability, this is what they go through when they wake up in the morning, they start here, they go here, 1, 2, 3, till the end of the day. everybody now will start seeing the challenges, but just imagining without knowing what you're imagining that being a PWD is a challenge and you don't know what you're imagining, then it can't actually, it can't help. So first of all, as persons living with disabilities, we would like to see the media trying to show people that, for instance, when you invited here, me here, Waiga, coming from home up to here, I needed a guide. I needed someone to hold my hand to come here. Coming into this studio, I needed somebody to assist me to get here. Unlike all my other friends who have sight, they'll come and get into the studio on their own. So unless, you know, it's one thing to be told, for example, that to be told a story like Jesus Christ was crucified, and it's another thing to be crucified yourself, or to witness somebody being crucified. So if the media could highlight the challenges faced by persons with disabilities, it could be the first milestone towards persons with disabilities being receiving the help that they need. And again, I must also point out that the representatives for persons with disabilities in our Assembly and Senate have not been doing enough to champion matters PWDs through legislation and representation. It has not been enough. I expected to see them come out, articulate issues, show people that persons with disabilities can articulate issues. Persons with disabilities can also plan for people and not sit back and wait to be planned for. So those are the things that I feel have not been highlighted about persons with disabilities.
Okay, I was going to ask you at the end, what would you have wanted to hear more from your representatives in Parliament, but you've tackled that towards the very end. Lydia has been agreeing quite a bit with what you and Nerima had to say. I can give her a chance to respond, but Moses has taken us to Parliament, and I do want to transition to BBI at some point, but first, I don't know if you have any reaction to what the other two guests have said.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nerima is a good friend of mine, so we will tend to agree a lot. I think we share the same values and views, especially on this issue of gender equality. And certainly I'd agree with Moses. I believe that stories are powerful, and representation, like I mentioned earlier, is also very powerful. So if, like he's saying, you're able to really see what it is like for a person in Nairobi, for instance, to wake up in the morning and go to work disabled and go back home, you know, and really begin to see how it is that they actually live their life, how they interact with the transport industry, how they interact with the eateries, how they interact with life in general, then it would give a better picture of people in terms of their welfare. I also, just the other day, paid a visit to the National Council for Persons Living with Disability, and they are facing a lot of challenges because they are not able to really keep up with their clientele, because their processes are very manual. So you can imagine if you are disabled somewhere in Kajiado and you have to travel all the way to Westlands to come just to get your disability card, or any services that you need at the, from the agency, you have to travel physically. And I think one of the things that we'll begin to see is perhaps government intervening with that council to try and automate their processes, try to bring technology closer, because I think of all of us who might need the ease of technology, persons with disability need it even more than the rest of us. And I think hopefully if the minister is able to pick that up, the Minister of ICT, we could be able to then change the fortunes for PWDs. I don't know if you want us to go immediately into BBI.
We can go into BBI. We know that yesterday lawmakers gave the BBI a clean bill of health with an overwhelming vote in support of the First Amendment. But immediately, if you went onto social media, a section of Kenyans were of the opinion, and let me read a tweet. It was actually, okay, he's called, what a name. I won't even say this name on air. But basically he said, I've never seen members of parliament showing up in large numbers to vote on a bill that directly affects the regular mwananchi. When it comes to a bill that supports their personal interests, they show up in crowds. They don't even care about their own health. in what some were worried might become a super spreader event. We saw almost 200 members of parliament gathered in the House yesterday till very late in the evening. Your thoughts on this and where we are in the BBI process?
To be fair to the legislatures, this is a momentous occasion. This is a change of the constitution. So it is incomparable with really anything else. You cannot even compare it with any other legislation or any other law, because what this does is fundamentally change how we will govern ourselves and any other laws that accrue from the constitution. So I wouldn't be too harsh on them in terms of how they showed up. And I think the fact that they actually showed up and they have been having a robust debate about this change of the constitution, and they've had it, I think, for a month plus. I think that's to say that they take it seriously. They don't take it casually, and we should not expect them to take it any less seriously than they did. And I think it's commendable for them to have dedicated the amount of time that they did on the matter. In terms of the fate of, the place of where BBI is right now, it's in a good place. I think we had some challenges a few weeks back.
Actually, speaking of challenges, hold on. And Nerima, I'm also coming to you. I'm sure you have something to say on this. ODM seems to have been suffering a little bit this week with what seems to be splits along. Is it 2022? Is it BBI? One can't quite tell. But some interesting sound bites, one from James Orengo and the other one, oh, okay, I'm told we don't have them right now. We'll play them a bit later on. But you've seen the back and forth in ODM, where on one hand you see Otiende Amolo saying something about one group is about BBI, the other group is about 2022. Politics and how it's interfering with a constitutional amendment and causing some to question the honesty of the constitutional amendment. That doesn't concern you, as it does some?
No, not really, Wahika, because it was always going to be a dicey balance for the principles to separate BBI from 2022, especially the closer it has come to the next election. If we had been able to do the referendum, say, during the first year of the handshake, perhaps, if we had been able to execute it and finish with it, then it would have made sense. But I think the president was hesitant to sponsor a public political process of that nature too early on in his term. And so he was always trying to push the referendum a little further into his term so that he can be able to get some of the work of delivery done. And now we are at that point when it's very difficult for Higa to separate those two things, because now people want to use the BBI to pivot their careers, their political visibility, their political alignments, and those kinds of things. And you cannot do away with either. What is fundamentally important to remember is that there was nothing about the 2022 candidature or prospects for people that had been discussed when the handshake was done. I think that has been very, very clear from both the president and the former prime minister. There were assumptions, of course, within the ODM camp that, you know what, this project, if we carry this project, it could portend for us certain political dividends if we are able to use it to profile our candidate, to profile ourselves, to lead, to stay in the limelight, and which they have.
And you're not speaking on behalf of ODM. This is your personal.
No, this is my personal
view. Okay.
This is me analyzing the situation and seeing that this is the collateral they had hoped to retrieve. And surely, I don't think they can say they have not retrieved some political collateral, because they have managed to stay center stage of politics in Kenya for the last 3 years, even though they were actually defeated in 2017 and should be lying low like an envelope. But they've been able to stay, top of mind with all of us. Raila has been able to stay top of mind just because of leading this BBI and handshake process. And so in terms of harvesting political collateral, I think they have done that. And to expect to harvest more than that, I think would be pushing the envelope, because the president is not able to commit beyond that, because what the agreement was, let's reform Kenya, let's put a jurisprudence that is able to have inclusivity, and then after that we will see. But right now I think there are people who are in the ODM camp who are a bit impatient and a little bit ungrateful, I would say, of of the limelight and the privilege of access and visibility that they have enjoyed.
Let's listen to a little bit of what was said this weekend by some leaders within the ODM party. Then I get a reaction from Nerima, get her thoughts on what happened yesterday. Parliament up late discussing that BBI bill. Let's listen to first Roriede MP Otiende Amolo.
Unfortunately, on our side, there are also people who are now focused only on the BBI and the handshake and benefits they get in these circumstances of cooperation and have lost sight of our goal in terms of Raila becoming president. And some of them have therefore become merchants. And that is the truth.
Have your own self-worth. And me, I can never be intimidated in my political life. Can never be intimidated. Because I've seen many people come and go. I've seen many powerful people come and go. I've seen presidents come here and go. I have seen people who, on their word, you would leave this house and you'll be locked in the same day. They have come and gone. I have seen very respected women in this country like Grace Onyango, who was in the committee for the special investigations relating to the disappearance of JM. Yeah. And that made me very proud because those days there were very few women. And she stood firm. She was required to change a report of the National Assembly. And she stood firm. So I want to plead with you. I want to plead with you. We got a heavy task. And if people out there feel you can be intimidated and you've been brought to this house with all the powers that we have, including the trial of a governor, imagine next time that you may have a motion for the trial of the president. Will you be intimidated? So I urge you, for the future of this country, in the performance of your constitutional duties, never be intimidated.
Nerima, a lot of politics, and yet this is a bill that will finally be presented to the people, and some people may be saying this morning, we are confused on the intentions, we are confused on what's happening behind the scenes. What do you make of it?
I agree. It wasn't very clear to begin with, but also the fact that even the gender bill failed about 6-7 times, we were never able to get 2/3. And yesterday, historically, we were able to get over 233. That has never happened in the history of this country. And to even think that they were there until 11 p.m., it can show you that these guys, by the way, they can work, even during a pandemic. So it's concerning, but even listening to Honorable Tiende Omolo is basically talking about, short-term goals. And I agree with him because you may be in the light right now, but you can only remain under the sun for a very short period of time. Not everybody can remain under the sun forever. And he's thinking about the future. And so is Honorable James. Because when we talk about intimidation, it's been there. If you did not agree with it, we have seen people being kicked out of committees. We have seen the strictness and the whipping that has been involved in putting people in place. As much as you can talk about it being party politics, what we're seeing is dissenting voices being muted. You're being told you do not have any right to have a different opinion. Everybody is going in this particular direction, and if you object to that, you will lose your position. So, it's just a reminder that this is something that has happened in our history before. It's not the first time. And I believe that James Orengo wants to be on the right side of history to say that, you know what, I took a stance, and I want that stance to be visible. And like always say, that all politics is local politics, because right now, publicly, a lot of people are saying that the economy is very difficult, terrible, they're struggling, high cost of living. So you don't want to be seen to be too removed from the individual who put you into that position of power. You have to also relate to them and also demonstrate that you're in a tight corner, and also doing the best that you can, considering the party politics and the politics in the country with this BBI piece.
Okay. We missed a little bit of your sound there, Nerima, but I did catch generally, most of your point. Moses, we expect that if Senate follows the National Assembly, BBI bill passes, and then now it's to the people. And it's those who are for BBI to come and popularize it with the people, and those who are against BBI to go and tell the people why they should not vote for the bill at the referendum. My question to you is, in terms of public participation, in terms of getting the message out, what do you hope to hear? What sort of questions do you hope will be answered? What are sort of the concerns, maybe first of the community you represent, persons with disabilities, Lower Eastern, and what you've been hearing about what you'd like to hear in that public participation that will help Kenyans to fully know all the details, with a referendum coming soon from what it appears?
Before I come to your question, allow me to cite one or two things about BBI. So first, politics of deceit and conmanship have been characterizing our political arena. First of all, BBI, or rather handshake, was sold as a panacea to the convoluted post-election skirmishes and dirty politics, negative ethnicity. But somewhere along the road, it turned out to be a kieleweke versus tanga thing, and then a handshake, these people versus this. And then down the line, where the 9 points agenda went, I don't know. Because first of all, BBI was to be a solution to one, post-election violence, and whatever they are bringing on board to say this and this will bring an end to post-election violence is, for instance, the return of the post of a leader of opposition. So in 2007, there was a leader of opposition, but we all know how it went down. So you telling me that the leader of opposition post will bring an end to post-election violence, you're actually lying to me. But to your question, Wahiga, what I'd like to hear from the BBI crusaders when they come to common mwananchi, first, I'd like them to explain to us. The BBI is amending Article 154, 155, 156, for instance, about the appointment of CSS and PSS, that they should not be, they will not be vetted by Parliament. They will be directly appointed by the President. But it's not amending Article 132, for instance, which says, I think B, which says that the President shall appoint the CSs and the PSs after the Parliament has approved, with the approval of the National Assembly. So when you look at that, you ask yourself, if BBI passes and we amend that, now the Okia or Mutata of this age will run to our courts, and maybe after the President has appointed his cabinet, and go to the courts and say, pursuant to Article 132, these people are in office illegally. And so those are the fundamental things that I want to be hearing. I don't want to be hearing that this is about Kieleweke and Tanga, the train has taken off, you need to join the train, and the chest thumping and all that. I need to see them articulate issues. I need to see them give mwananchi all these BBI materials to read and see through what exactly is contained in BBI for mwananchi to make an informed decision.
Have you yourself, how closely have you been able to interact with the bill? personally?
Personally, I've gone through the bill because I have a smartphone, luckily. I know not many persons with disabilities have that. So I went through the bill and cited some gray areas.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Lydia, I'm sure has also had a chance to go through the bill closely. You hear his concerns. And in terms of the next step of public participation, what do you want to see done? Because there are a lot of questions, some valid, some maybe based off rumors that many Kenyans would have.
I think the ultimate goal, of the sponsors would be that people understand the bill as it is and not the propaganda that has been there. There are a lot of misconceptions, including people who went out of their way to create fake documents that had nothing to do with the mother document. And when you go to the village, Mohiga, you encounter those funny documents, written funny things about many things. So you will, I think, if we are able to achieve that factual awareness of every single individual, to have that, every adult who is eligible to vote on it, to have the factual information, and then they can make an informed decision. I think that would be the ideal scenario. And so the closer we get to 100% awareness, the better, I think, for the sponsors, because Wahiga have not encountered anybody who, once you sit down with them and explain every single clause, no matter how opposed they were to the BBI, I have not encountered one person whose mind has not been changed once you explain the facts and figures of the BBI report. People like myself, and this is a comment I wanted to make about this issue of Orengo. These are people who are being very disingenuous because they have been part of the process. They knew about the 70 seats, which is what had been causing contention in the House. All these things were negotiated way in advance, and all those matters were settled. So for people like Orengo to come and begin to bring issues because they want some constituencies allocated in other places, and it was very clear how the formula had been applied, so that the regions such as Roiro and a lot of Central and Western, where numbers of representation had been so off, yeah, there are people whose vote is more superior than others, where everybody's vote in this country should be equal. And so the people, and you introduced me earlier as a founder of Daughters of the Mountain. For us, it is very, very clear. If this BBI is about anything for us, it is about one man, one vote, and one man, one shilling. Because for some strange reason, about a decade ago, our leaders accepted an inferior position where Mount Kenya gets less resources, Mount Kenya is less represented, and we are actually correcting a historical error. We're not even asking for reparations because they should give us backdated CDF, yeah, for all those misrepresentation numbers that we had. And so going forward, Wahiga, in terms of this bill, we will now really encounter, if there is no team, they will have to come out clearly and persuade people not to vote. I think there's a group, the civil society group that is led by Kina Martha Karua and Daisy Amdani. That group perhaps will begin to see them now really come out and tell people, do not vote for this bill for this and these reasons. Okay. And then there will be, of course, those ones who will be persuading people. But what we are going to see is not a very polite engagement as we have seen so far. Because so far there has not been a proper competition about, vote or don't vote. It's been about awareness. It's been about, let's go through the stages. But where we are headed, it's now do or die. It's a yes or it's a no. Someone has to win and someone has to lose.
It's do or die in the middle of a pandemic, but that's a story for another day. Before we take that break, Lydia, you said you've not met someone who you haven't laid the facts and figures about BBI on and convinced them. Before we take that break, Nerima Wako is on the line. In the beginning, when she made her opening statement, you could see she's not very clear on her stand on BBI. Nerima, I hope I've not misquoted you on that.
If
that is the case, Lydia, convince her. What are the facts and figures of BBI this morning that should make Nerima back it as strongly as you do?
I know Nerima's heart is with the 2/3 gender rule, and I can assure her that that elusive 2/3 threshold that we have not had in Parliament will finally be secured in BBI. And not only will we get the numbers, first of all, we'll have parity in the Senate in terms of men and women. We will then have 2/3 in the National Assembly, and we will have meaningfulness of representation, because nobody will be nominated unless they have actually gone all the way to the IBC ballot and demonstrated capacity for leadership.
Nerima, I need to take a break, but I need to give you a chance to respond. Is that already something?
You know, it sounds very nice. Lydia, it sounds so good. But
It
you know,
is so
my
good.
concern is the implementation part. I'm just wondering how we will be able to achieve that with the same people. It just does not make sense to me, but also the fact that the things that you're talking about, there are also a number of things within the document that I believe are great for the country, but I'm just wondering if it should go through a whole referendum to be able to be implemented. I just think as a country we could have just evaluated our constitution itself, seen the gaps, gone through a review, and then just properly done and be able to make the changes that we need to make. Because I don't think the constitution is perfect in itself. It has gaps, including even looking at the Senate, not having budgetary allocation. There are changes that need to be made, and even much more going to the counties. I agree on that. But whether we needed to go through a referendum and to make such changes to me is where I have a problem with the whole thing. I don't think there's need for such drastic changes of constitution.
Nerima, I'll give you a bit more time after the break just to lay out what would convince you then in that case, because you've given some of your concerns there. Let's take that break. When we come back, I'll give Nerima a chance. Moses was also weighing in on this. And what are your thoughts? 22422 is the SMS line. #Daybreak. We'll be right back.